Everybody, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board podcast, where we bring in experts from the franchising industry to help coach you in actionable, maybe different ideas to help challenge the way that you're doing things and making franchising a better place for everyone. I've got with me Thomas Scott today, and Thomas, if you haven't met him, you need to know him because he thinks a lot differently about franchising in a really good way. But let me introduce you to him, and then we'll talk about the topic. Thomas is the CEO founder of Home Run Franchising. And he's been in the industry, what, 25 years plus, Thomas?
25 going on 30. It's
Yeah,
like
going on
longer
30.
by the day.
Yeah, but there are a couple of things that I find really interesting. Is it 19 brands that you've worked with so far, Thomas?
Yeah, I've been a franchisor of 9 different brands, all in the service space, starting with Show Homes, Home Staging, which is still around, and culminating with the 4 brands that Home Run franchises today. I've been a supplier through our other company, Brand Journalists. We've done development work. We've grown over 450 franchise brands, recruited over 12,000 people, and I've been a multi-unit owner in 5 brands. So I'm a franchise enthusiast slash franchise junkie. Like, I'm really big on the franchise industry, and I really believe in its ability to change our culture and society.
Yeah, you're well, and you and I were talking about something right before this, but I hadn't thought about this in this way. But franchising is also one of the most inclusive, representative industries. If you look at it as a cross section, like it really aligns well with the demographics of the country and much
Yeah,
more.
if you look at the census data of minority business ownership in the U.S., it's somewhere between 10 and 14% of all businesses in the U.S. are minority owned. If you look at the same data for the franchise industry, our percentage of minority business ownership, minority franchisees, is around 33%. It's pretty close to what the census number is. So we're
Mhm.
um, unknowingly the most inclusive and diverse kind of business sector in the United States. And
Yeah.
they're really important because I think franchising is a very worthy industry. It's what Gary Vaynerchuk calls the greatest American business model, because it allows everybody to participate in the economy at their full market value, and that's a big deal. That's how you get income equality. That's how you break down barriers. You allow anybody who has the drive and is crazy enough to start a business to have a better chance to succeed, improve their community, help the lives of other people, just make positive change.
Mhm. I love it. Yeah, and there's so much of that of the industry itself as you look at it as a whole, even though it's the cross section of many industries, technically, it's a very giving space. Like I've felt
Yes.
welcome. Been in it, 4.5 years now. I just love the people and the thought process and the model itself is very giving, right? It's the idea of how do I help you create generational wealth? And you might just been working a janitorial job and scraping things to get together. And now 10 years later, you can be handing off a multi-million-dollar operation to your next generation. Like it's powerful what we can accomplish in this industry. So I'm
Oh yeah, it's we call it in our. I teach my guys. It's like you have to think about this as noble work. Like, you're really not just helping the one person lift themselves up and create the path that they want. It affects so many people when you get successful franchise operations, and it's like a domino. Like, it just picks up massive momentum for positive change, and you do it all around this proven business model. It's a very kind of smart way to excel. I mean, there's a good reason why franchise owners outperform startup businesses by as much as 40%. Like, they're worth more, they perform better, they're scalable, they're less risky. I mean, franchising is where it's at. It's really interesting when you get into younger entrepreneurs. If we're going to talk a little bit about Gen Z
oh,
franchisees, I tell people at 53, I associate as a Gen Z because you can do that these days. You can just pick whatever you associate with. So I might
yeah.
as well be a 23-year-old entrepreneur. But I really think that the opportunity for young entrepreneurs is huge, and franchising is coming of age in a way that, it's in my history, it's never done. Like, we're going through some explosive growth, and growth for the right reasons in a way we've never seen before. Like, as younger people get in, and they don't have hangups about the franchise model like baby
Yeah.
boomers and Gen X folks did.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, let's introduce the topic in that context because I think that what we want to talk about today, guys, is why your franchise growth strategy sucks. Like why it's what do you need to do differently? Because there's every conference I go to, and forgive me, Matt, and the IFA team, but almost every concept or conference I go to, it's the same content from the same group of people about the same model that's been done for the last 50 years, and yet there are other ways and better ways to approach franchise development, franchise support, franchising. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is how do we challenge that paradigm a little bit from people who've been doing it and doing it well for many years. Thomas is that's why he's here today, guys. So Thomas, let's cue that up just for a minute, if you don't mind. Riff, tell
Yeah.
us a bit about like what are some of the fundamental flaws that you see in the way the traditional model works for building out a franchise and growing a franchise. And then let's we're going to break those topics down, give some people some actionable ideas and insights from you.
Yeah, and I think let's start with really basic stuff. Like
Mhm.
franchising is a systemized business that you teach
Yeah.
somebody. So if you're in the franchise business and you're going to be a franchisor, you're in the franchise business. You're not in the coffee business or the carpet cleaning business or the painting business or whatever the business. I think that's the one key mistake a lot of emerging franchisors make is they don't take the time to really learn what franchising is all about. And at its basis, franchising is just a really simple two metric business. It's just boil it down to all the way to the basics. If you have a business that you can teach somebody that makes them happy, where they love what they do and they have a good time and it's fun and they make money, those the two metrics. Are they happy first? They have to be happy before you make money. You can make a lot of money in franchising and hate the culture and hate the business. And I watched a Pinkberry franchisee who had 3 units in New Jersey walk away from a business that was almost 300 plus EBITDA a year. Just walked away and closed them down because he hated the culture. And before it got acquired, like making money isn't enough for people today to really get over the hump. You have to love what you do today to be good. So
Hmm.
creating a culture where people really love what they do, that's your job as a franchisor. And the second part of it is if you Google how much it costs to start a business, you go to Google and you just type in how much does it tip, what's the average cost to start a business? What Google will give back to you in the excerpt is $30,000. Like that's the cost of the average business is $30,000. If
Mhm.
you Google how much does the average franchise cost, it comes back with $250,000. Like it's a huge gap between what the average person is looking to do and what the average franchise, according to Google, cost. And so I think if you're going to grow an emerging system, the closer you can get to the 30 mark,
Mhm.
the bigger your funnel is. I mean, there's in the research we do and looking at Google data and kind of census data, there's as many as 28, 29 million people at any point in the United States looking at franchising or starting a business. There's literally almost 30 million people. That's a lot. We last year in 2022, the franchise industry opened 17,000 new locations. So
Wow.
out of 29 million people, I think that sucks. I think we missed the mark a little bit.
Yeah.
And we did it to ourselves. Like I think we're responsible for that performance gap. And I think anybody starting a franchise today, if you want to, and I was just at the Franchise Expo West in Phoenix, which was a lot of fun, the MFV Expo.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to me. They had 38 franchisor booths and 46 supplier booths. It was like more people helping people franchise businesses than people actually franchising businesses. And
Hmm.
every other person that I talked to, almost 50% of the people were people looking to franchise their business. They had a, bubble tea shop or a coffee shop or some kind of service business or a restaurant or a retail shop of some kind. And so the interest in people franchising their businesses is bigger than it's ever been. We open more than one new franchise a day now in the United States. And if you look at North American numbers, there's somewhere 6 or 7 thousand franchise systems, and we're going to be at 10 or 15,000 in 5 years. Like it's when I got into franchising, growth was from 1,200 to 1,500 to 1,800 to 2,000. That took 20 years. We
Yeah.
went from 2,000 to 7,000 in the last 5 or 6 years. It's scary how fast we've grown.
Well, and let's, I mean, even though it's not the purpose of this conversation today, there's something changing dramatically in the system or in that interest in franchising. I think part of it is private equities moving that direction. People are seeing the exit strategies. People are
Yeah.
getting more exposed to franchising. But just having a higher volume of available franchise concepts doesn't necessarily serve the individuals who are looking to start a business unless they're set up properly, right? That's my concern is seeing people flood to the industry is a lot of them are flooding to the industry with bad ideas or get rich quick ideas. And that's not
Yeah.
really how if you want to succeed
No.
in franchising, that's not how it works.
No, definitely. If you're one of those people who goes to a trade show and starts asking kind of, iFranchise or MSA or any of the people that are there, you'll see really quickly that the advice is kind of really traditional and old school. It costs about $250,000. You have to get an expensive FDD. You have to create an ops manual. You have to get a trademark. You have to get insurance. You have to have a training program. You have to have websites. All that 250 grand really is just to get you ready to franchise. And there's very little talk about, okay, I got all my docs ready. Now what do I do? Like, how do I go about creating a culture? How do I create a recruiting process? How do I create a marketing systems to generate leads? Like, how do I kind of fulfill everybody's on the promise that I'm making to people when they join my system? And I think that's probably where people hit the wall, is not understanding the next phase, that like early phase. There's a reason that 85% of franchisors never get over 25 units. Like, it's not hard to get people over 25 units. We've done it hundreds of times. It just, people like think wrong about it. I mean, they get very focused on selling franchises. The mistake number one people make, why I think your development strategy is really sucky,
Yeah.
is if you're going to franchise, let's say that you have Dave's bubble tea joint,
Mhm.
and I would set up, I would find 4 or 5 friends of mine or family or people I knew or employees in your current shop to be my first 4 or 5 franchisees. I would give them a franchise and I would say, you're the pioneer guinea pig group. And we're going to break everything. We're going to build all the systems. We're going to prove out the model. But you have 5 franchisees who are going to pay you royalties. So you have some income stream. But by the end of the first year, you're going to have like validation and earnings and systems and structure, and you'll know if the business is viable.
Yeah.
I do that with every brand that I start because we like to pioneer brands. I always incubate with a small group of people that I just waive the franchise fees for and get them up to running. And I find that I'll get from 5 to 50 like in a fraction of the time somebody else does. Like, I'll see people, they have 1 unit and they're trying to get full list price for selling their first one. Like, don't make some poor person like be your guinea pig and break
Yeah.
everything and risk their. So that's the number one mistake I think, is people get their initial development strategy should be, you need to, like, if you can't get friends and family and people to buy into your business for free, then you are a really serious problem.
Huh. Yeah, well, and there's more to it than that, though. And let's talk about
Right.
that. The approach that you're describing, which I've talked to a bunch of people about, because I've heard from experts that this is a way that most people that are successful do it. So you're resonating really well with other experts I've chatted with about this.
Yeah.
But there's more to it than that. You also have your first 5, right? Or your first 10, they'll make or break you. But
Yeah.
you find people, to your point earlier, that are passionate about the brand and that are making money, right? So let's talk about people that are passionate about the brand. Well, if you've got a successful business, and let's say it's a swim school or something like
Right.
that, who are the most passionate people about your brand? Well, it's
Right.
the mom that has 5 kids that have gone through your school, and she absolutely loves you, and she stays and talks to you after she picks up her kid. Like, there are people that are passionate about your brand, and they are thrilled with the service you provide.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, that's like the home run person to be your first franchise owner.
Okay, customers. Yeah, Jersey Mike's, the famous sub franchise, when they got to 1,000 units, they did this really interesting study that kind of got lost to time. But they looked at, like, a lot of food concepts. They were thinking, we need to like just recruit multi-unit food guys. Like, that's what all food people will tell you. And they did some research and they figured out that of the 1,000 units, there were 4 types of buyers. There were multi-unit, kind of existing multi-unit people that came from another chain. There were high net worth investors that had operational partners and just invested in the business. There were existing kind of restaurant managers that came from another concept. And then there were passionate customers who liked the sandwiches. Like, out of those 4 groups, which one do you think was the operationally the best group? Like, where did the top performers come from?
Well, it feels like a leading question, so I'm going to use my intuition and say the last one, the passionate customers who
Yeah.
bought a franchise.
Yeah, it was fascinating to them because it was the complete opposite of their development strategy. The high
Uh-huh.
net worth people, the kind of absentee owners, or the executive model, that was the worst group. Like, they failed at the highest rate. Because really, if you're not putting a lot of, even if you have a lot of money, if you're not really passionate or engaged in the brand, a food business, you have to watch.
Yeah.
The multi-unit owners were really hard to support because they came with a way of doing business from another chain, and they had to you had to untrain them before you could kind of get them to focus right. And
Okay.
they would sign these really big development deals 5, 10, 20 units and open one and never open the others. Like that's endemic in our industry. That happens a lot.
all the
Um,
time.
Same with the managers. The managers were used to running somebody else's systemized business and not the Jersey Mike's business. And so that when they looked at their successful multi-unit owners, they were all undercapitalized, highly passionate people that were customers that bought a single unit,
Mhm.
and they grew their own multi-unit owners. And I think that we can all learn from that vignette about Jersey Mike's, that
Mhm.
I think your best chance, if you're going to grow 250 unit service chain, 50% of those should be internal expansions from people that you sell single unit to. Like you
Mhm.
should grow your own units. Don't worry about getting 5 and 10 pack deals. You probably don't have the expertise to pull that off anyway. Just
Yeah.
find people who like what you do and buy into the mission and like the culture. Yeah, our dryer vent superheroes is a really low cost service brand, and I go after Gen Z owners. A lot of college grads and young entrepreneurs and family businesses, and we goof off and we wear Superman capes, and I take pictures of them on top of buildings, and they jumping out of vans, and
Uh-huh.
it's that kind of fun, kind of take over the universe kind of culture. And we have a
Yeah.
good time. Like that's not for everybody, but
Mhm.
young entrepreneurs really like it. And that's an easy business to scale. And we get people in a single unit, and we have a roadmap to get to 8 units.
Mhm.
Here's when you buy the second van. Here's when you buy the second unit. Here's when you add the next tech, and it just repeats all the way up to 8 units. So somebody on like a business that they might put 20 or $30,000 down on ends up with a 2 or 3 or $4 million business 4 years later. Like
Yeah.
that's when you're talking to Gen Z owners, those 26 and under guys, women guys, like they think jobs are for losers. Like they don't want a job. They don't want to
Yeah.
work in a cubicle. Like who the hell wants to work 40 hours a week and lose all of your work-life balance and have no control over what happens to you? I mean, anybody with any resources at all and any kind of social media acumen and people skills can go out and make 70 or $80,000 today without a job. Like
Mhm.
it's any kind of entrepreneur. When you can get on TikTok and look for small business ideas or six-figure business ideas, and in 10 minutes you can school yourself up on how to make that kind of money.
Mhm.
So why would they work for a $60,000 job or a 40? Like who? Why would you do that? Like, and
Yeah.
the answer is they don't want to. They're looking for somebody to step up and give them a viable alternative. And
Yeah.
franchising is where it's at, because we have a professional development path and a structured coaching environment that's perfect for that person. Like you're a 19-year-old kid. If I met your 19-year-old kid and started schooling him up on, hey, where do you want to be in 3 years? Wouldn't you like to be a badass? You want to make more money than your dad? You want to do these things. Like I would get him going in a service business and teach him how to be a multi-unit owner. And by the time he's 30, he's can run any business anywhere in the United States. And he can do that for the rest of his life. I think as parents, I have an 18, 19-year-old kid myself and some kids in their 20s.
Mhm.
Like you have to teach them entrepreneurship. You have to make that like a viable path for people, because that's like they're not they're taught in school to do the opposite of that. Go be a lawyer, go be a teacher, go be some other lousy career that's like has no future and is really hard, and you go into debt $300,000 to go to school. Screw
Yeah.
that. Become a
Yeah.
franchisee and take over the universe, and somebody's got to hire all those MBAs anyway.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And it's funny because I've seen, yeah, I think I'm just a little bit younger than you, but seeing that generation of
Just a little, yeah, just a little.
slightly, maybe not as much as you think, but yeah, but
Yeah,
still. But I've
yeah.
noticed that younger generation, uh, folks our age, we say they're so hard to employ. They're not great employees. They don't want to work, but that's not it at all. They just
Don't
don't
want
want,
to be an employee.
they don't want
They
to be
want
stuck at a desk, right?
Yeah, because jobs are for losers. That's the default. If you look at the Small Business Association statistics on young entrepreneurs, they're really staggering. Those Gen Zs, they have like a 75-80% aptitude towards entrepreneurship. 60 to 65% are already looking to start a business, and 1 out of 3 already has a business or side hustle. They
Wow.
already have it. Like when I recruit those guys, like they make up about 30% of who I recruit in my brands. They make up 60 or 70% of my top performers. They outperform a 50-year-old well-capitalized guy like all day long. Because let's be honest, when you're in your 20s, I don't remember what I did in my early 20s. I can't tell you anything. I was a screw off, like a lot of us. And when you're in your early 20s, you don't have high you're not super in debt. You have a ton of energy. You'll work like a maniac. You can live on mom's couch. Like
Mhm.
you can take risk like crazy when you're 22 or 23 or 24, and you could fail 7 times in a row and you just learn and you just get better. And it's like, why wouldn't you start a business when you have that unbelievable opportunity to like use all your resources? Like 55 is not the best time to start a business. That's what you do when you have no choices. Like
Yeah.
25 is like, man, you're like the guy. You can be the king of the hill or the queen of the hill, whatever, it is for you. It's an amazing time. I just think franchising offers that generation of people a much better path for real professional development. Because the other thing that we don't hear a lot of people talking about and how you should frame your value proposition for your franchise opportunity is that the whole remote work movement sucks for professional development. Like you like not only do you not get a job, but you if you're in a remote work situation, you don't get the little water cooler conversations. You don't get to work with more experienced people throughout the day. All those little tiny conversations are how you learn about life and relationships and problem solving. You don't
Yeah.
get those on Slack channels and in Zoom meetings once a day. It just doesn't work.
Well,
So franchise offers somebody a viable alternative to develop professionally beyond learning the business model. You can coach people, and so if you start to talk like that, like I'm talking, you'll find that there's an entire audience of people that are hungry for that message, and they really like this idea of being a in my case a service franchisee, but it works with food or any other sector of franchising too.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And that's when you look, so I've got a 19-year-old and he's awesome, super talented, and he doesn't want a job. Like he is like
Send him my way.
yeah,
I'll create a path for him. Like
yeah, well,
yeah,
maybe. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that afterward. Honestly, I'm not joking either. But
yeah,
yeah, but the more and more he and I talk, the more I realize, if we could turn him loose, like with a franchise concept, and he could be one of our primary operators. Like that's where we're leaning as parents. Is like I went through school. I've got a couple of degrees. Like I
yeah,
learned a ton. I almost went
yeah.
to med school, and doctors. That's a great career, but guess who's more hamstrung and restricted in their career than anybody right now?
Oh,
Doctors.
yeah,
And so
doctors.
I know a bunch of doctors that hate it. They hate their lives. They're
Well,
like,
I don't know that there's nothing wrong with those careers. They're just, if you're a high D kind of driven person and you got to also remember people like your son's age, like they're schooled on tales of entrepreneurship. They've grown up, we call them the YouTube generation because
yeah,
they have radically different ideas of how to learn and expectations of what information should be available and also expectations on like they don't just buy into that you have to go get a job. Like baby boomers were taught to go to college, work for a Fortune 500 company, pay your dues, work 70 hours a week, shut up, do your
the
work.
401k, retire when
Yeah,
you're
like retire
55.
at 55, get a pension, like Gen
Yeah,
X people my age, we think that's ridiculous. Like, what the hell is a pension anyway? Like, nobody gets those. And
doesn't exist
why would
anymore.
I destroy my mental health and my marriage and become an alcoholic and get laid off? And this is like that promise didn't exist. It's a fake promise.
Mhm.
And so you get all the way down to younger millennial and Gen Z, and they're like, we want to make the world a better place. We want to design the life we want to live, and then find entrepreneurial ways to make it funded. And that's where franchising shines. Like, a lot of the young entrepreneurs I have, they don't even want to own one brand. They want to own multiple units of 3 or 4 brands. That's their goal. They're starting out on day one with this is my goal. This is what I have. I only have $20,000 today to get started because I'm 22, which is a lot of money for a 22-year-old. But
Yeah.
if you're open to take a chance on those people, they're coachable, they're
Mhm.
hungry, they have the drive, they're professional, they're easy to train. Like I don't, like I'm 53. People that age when I was the only people who got into business were people who flunked out of school and drank too much, and was what the parents did when you had somebody that there was no other options. That's not true today. So
Mhm.
we have a generational bias towards young people that we need to overcome as franchisors to make it work right.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Well, you were telling me we won't talk about the brand, but before we
Yeah.
chatted, that there's a brand that's focused on technology that had a requirement that you couldn't be any younger than like 40 or 45 to get into
Yeah.
the franchise.
It's a good brand. It's a client. I really like this brand. Team Logic IT is the name of the brand, and they're a fabulous brand. They have an amazing value proposition. They've really kind of created this whole MSP space of helping small businesses like solve technology problems. And if you think about it today, everybody's that's in business is struggling with remote work and going to the cloud and cybersecurity and
Yeah.
hardware. And this is a real issue.
Mhm.
And they have this perception because they're older as a group. They're all in their late 40s to 70s, kind of in that 50, 60 age group, that only somebody their age is going to have the business acumen, and that's the word they use to do well at this business. And I'll pull up TikTok and I'll say, look, being a technologist is the hip, cool career. It's like the snazzy technology consultant. It's like being a social media coach, but for small business technology problems. Young people like dig that. Like it's really a cool thing to do with your life. And they really don't want people who are IT people. They want people that can go out and talk to business owners. Who do you think the average business owner is in any community? It's somebody who's 25 or 30.
Uh-huh.
Like it was a disconnect. And then I think they've kind of come around a little bit, opening up. But I think we all have to, like one of the big lessons that people mess up their development plans is you have to think more broadly. You need to figure out like, how do I make my brand fit with all four generations, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. They all have radically different ideas of how they view opportunity and what they want out of a business.
Oh yeah. Well, and I see that as being an issue because you look at the majority, if you get on like, let's say Vetted Biz, I don't know if you know
Yeah.
that platform, and you look at what are the requirements for someone to get into a business, it's written as if like, well, the only person that can qualify for this is a 45-year-old that's got a $250,000 sitting in the bank to get into this franchise concept.
Well, yeah, a lot of concepts want you to have $250,000. Like I don't even care how much money you have. Honestly, I don't want to see your bank statement. I don't care what your net worth is. That's a ridiculous thing to look. I mean, it sounds like really bad for a franchisor to say that, but that should not be the thing you qualify on. That should be the very last thing that comes into play. What really matters are you have a hunger and a passion for business? Are you good with people? Are you a culture fit for the brand we're building? And is this a brand that you would enjoy working? Like those things, really, can you execute the model are much more important to me than whether you can fund it. There's a lot of ways to fund businesses today. And I think, especially in a recession era, as a franchisor, you have to be really creative. You have to break things up into payments and make allotments and do fractional stuff and just come up with creative ways to fund deals. If I was talking to you, I'd probably kind of get you to do a HELOC loan on your house or something, a tax deductible, simple, like get a $25,000 home equity loan and we'll waive some of the fee or break it up into interest-free payments, or, like make it like, why does it have to be so hard to pull some of this off? Those people are very loyal to you as a franchisor because you created an opportunity that nobody else would give them. And I think when you're trying to get from 0 to 50 units, now if you're at 100 or 200 units, that's a different animal. You're a mature brand, you can afford to be picky.
Mhm.
But when you're getting a brand off the ground, you have to go after the recruiting kind of efforts that other people are overlooking. That's where you find your deals.
Yeah. No, and here you said something important a second ago I want to go back to.
Yeah.
As a franchisor, especially as you're getting started, the one thing that you don't want to do is have build a relationship with your franchisees that's cold and distant and business
Oh
and
yeah.
strictly business, right? Like you just said something that no, I don't hear a lot of franchisors say, and I don't think this way, which is I want to do something that's going to create loyalty
Yeah.
and do something that'll support my franchisees, maybe above and beyond what I've got in the FDD. Now, you got to be careful. You can't do things outside of the FDD, but you can do things that will creatively fulfill the requirements of the FDD that will enable someone who maybe you see as a cultural and the right personality fit that's going to be successful, but maybe they're undercapitalized. Well, what is your real goal here? Are you trying to live off of the franchise fee? And if so, you're screwed, right? You got to become royalty independent. But if you're really trying to build a loyal brand with a great culture, which is going to get you to 200 units at some point, it starts with the first 10 and then the next 20. And if you do things for the franchisees that enable them, empower them to be successful, they're not going to
Yeah.
grumble every time they write you a royalty check. You're
Right.
completely changing the culture.
Right. Yeah. I think that's an interesting. So there's two types of cultures in franchising. If you look at all the franchise systems, they fall into one of these two categories. Category number one is we have a performance culture. That's my preference. Is like, that's like, what can I do for you today, and how big do you want to grow this business? And that's get out and do this together and do it as a team. That's a performance culture. A compliance culture, which is something really endemic in franchising, and I think it's very problematic because it kills the franchise relationship. Is I'm going to come into your store or look at your thing, and I'm going to give you a list of the 47 things you're doing wrong where you're out of compliance. Like, that's, to be honest, if you're an entrepreneur and you have the balls to do a business like this, you didn't want to be an employee in the beginning when somebody treats you like an employee the way an operations person would if they're doing compliance visits.
Yeah.
That kills all the momentum in a business. and it's the 100% the wrong way to run a franchise system if growth is your goal.
Yeah.
So I think, like brand standards and some basic compliance is important, and you just need to lay out like if you coach people right, their goals and your goals are aligned, and you have a system that produces a predictable result. And you get into a performance culture. We use performance cultures and we talk about how it's a competition. Business is a race and a competition, and we're gonna like overtake our competitors and we're gonna win. And I create competition with the franchisees by publishing sales data internally. Look at who's number one, and they get like fiercely. No entrepreneur wakes up and wants to be an underperformer. Nobody wakes up and says, I'm going to go screw my business up today. We
Uh-huh.
all want that. So create a culture where that thrives and is rewarded and celebrated.
Yeah, I love that. And you said something interesting there, because you can have two types of competition I think are healthy in a franchise
Yeah.
system. One is, across the franchise units, like friendly competition, challenges, stack ranking, orders, like those things really help. And most franchise systems I know that are thriving are doing things like that today. But there's
Yeah.
another one that you mentioned that I want to highlight, which is you as a team, because you can compete against each other, right? Like I just finished coaching high school baseball. I retired this year, so my son's done. I don't have any other players in the family. But on the team, we wanted people to be a little competitive with each other about
Yeah.
certain things, right? We're doing a drill. We teach the skill, and now we're having a competition with the drill, and which is fun. Let's see who's last man standing on the Golden Glove competition, and it's fun. And they're yelling and they're shouting at each other, but having a good time. And nobody walks away from that field hating each other because they didn't perform well, but they pushed each other to a new level because they wanted to be better. That's positive. The second one you mentioned though is, as a team, we were also competitive against other teams. Like we
Yeah.
collectively said, "Hey, guys, we took second in state last year. Like we
Awesome.
drove them to a new level. And the only team that could beat us was the 4A school that dropped to a 3A that was a Catholic regional school that had kids from
Yeah.
all the country. A six guy throwing 88 at us as a sophomore, right? Like it was hard to. We were the only team that beat them in the state that was
That's
3A.
awesome.
Couldn't beat them twice in the tournament.
Well,
But
that's why I named my company Home Run Franchises, and we talk about joining the winning team. Like it is a competition; it's fun.
yeah,
I think if you create the transparency and you're willing to let the numbers speak for themselves, if your goal is to coach people through to a certain financial performance and to break the barriers and to help them exceed their expectations, and you are willing to be transparent with your data and own the stuff that it doesn't work right, because not everything works right in business. Like things blow up on us all the time.
yeah.
But your job as a franchisor is to make sure your franchisees have enough leads and structured marketing that they can hit those goals, particularly in a service business.
Mhm.
Then what you'll find is franchising is a social media version of business. Like it's a social thing. That's one of the big attraction points for franchising is you get to hang out with all these other owners who are doing the same stuff. And we're all so we use Facebook owner groups, which do a great job of push notifications. They're closed groups. We post lots of fun TikToks and we post pictures of vans, and people put like in the up closets, our closet brand, they'll put pictures of their closets up, and like to see who can get the most expensive closet and who has the best sales. And you'll find that your top performers, the people that post big sales, that's how you communicate change in your system. Is instead of me telling you like, Dave, I want you to do these 4 things, here's stuff I don't like you're doing. If I say, Dave, check out John. Look at what John did this month. If you see his data, it's amazing. Let's go look at. You want to see what he did? I can give you the tips. So he did these 4 things. Like a totally different message. It's a psychology thing, and
Yeah.
you want to be John because you want to beat him. You're a competitive guy. I can see it in your face, and that's so it's just that's learning the business of franchising, of how to influence people. I learned a lot of that from Greg Nathan, the Australian author who writes a lot about franchise operations. He calls himself a franchise psychologist. If you haven't read his books, unbelievable books that every franchisor should read. I think
Yeah.
his company's called the Franchise Relationship Institute. Occasionally they let him into the US, but he's an
On
interesting guy.
occasion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just want to go back to what you were just sharing, because this is another key thing that any emerging growing brand or even established brand that needs to figure it out needs to know. The power, in my personal opinion, is the power of the franchise business model is in the collective genius of the operators. It's not
Right.
in the corporate office.
Yeah.
And you'll find, everybody knows this, but the longer you franchise, the more units you get, the less they want to hear from you. And the most powerful way to coach them is peer to peer. So as a
Right.
franchise system, the more in tune you are with the unit, the unit operations and who the top performers are in different categories of the process, right? You'll have one franchise location that is just crushing it at converting new leads into scheduled appointments, but they might suck at closing deals. But the guy just around the corner is crushing his deal closing, but he can't schedule to save his life. Well,
Right.
rather than you try to train both of them how to do it, if you just say, hey, Bob, you and Henry, go get lunch. When we get together for a regional mixer, I want you guys to sit down for half an hour. Or here's a call each other, sit down and train him on this, and you listen to him on that, and fix your businesses. They're 100 times more likely to listen to and implement what they hear from their peer than they are from you as a franchise.
Right. Yeah, and it takes operations support and marketing people with enough intellectual capital to understand what you just said. And that's where a lot of brands, like, they hire the wrong people to be operations people. Like, it's a really sophisticated job supporting and onboarding and training and coaching franchisees. If you're going to do, for instance, we do like one-on-one onboarding for the first few months, and then we get people into peer groups that meet once a week, and we do bi-weekly like brand calls for each brand, and we have the Facebook group. So everything is social. There's always groups of people. And I think you have to think about your franchisees as your core customer. Like, you're in this, my job is to be the customer service person for my franchisees. And every conversation we have starts with, how can I help you? What do you need help with? Like, what can I do to help you? Like, where are you stuck? Like, what's like, not like, here's what I want you to do. It's not about what I want. It's about helping them accomplish. Because if you have happy franchisees, you can grow exponentially because they validate well. People will buy a business if they talk to you and you say, man, that dryer vent business is amazing. Or Up Closets, it's the best business ever. I can't believe it's like, I don't know what I was doing before. This is awesome. Or having fun, and we make money and it's cool. If you have annual conferences, what I tell clients is, look, like, if you're going to have a 2.5-day annual conference, the corporate team should limit their speaking to 2.5 hours or less. Like, have a State of the Union conference slide and say a guest speaker, and then shut the hell up. And everything else, the rest of the 2 days, is all panels of franchisees talking about how they do specific things and talking among each other. You'll find that people will go spend massive amounts of money to come to those, and they'll rate it really high, mostly because you just created a facilitated environment for them to share and get enthused about the business you're in. That's a really hard lesson to teach franchisors, because with ego, we think it's all about us. It's not. It's about those people.
Yeah, I've got to share something about this, and I
Yeah.
won't share brand, but I was at a conference earlier this year, and it was a home service company. They were doing a franchise, or they're doing their own conference for the first time, and it was 90% corporate team. Now, know the temptation, right? The temptation is, we have to justify the royalty monies you spend with us. We have to justify the ad spend. We have to justify this. So we're going to stand on the stage and tell you how we're going to justify all this money you're giving us. And the most important thing that the individual franchisees said, they said, it was time talking to you, Dave. It was time talking to the other suppliers. It was time talking to my peers at dinner. We got together with a group of folks. We were playing ping pong out on the patio, and we were talking about business. And they're like, this was better than the 2 hours that I numbed my butt listening to someone talk about tech strategy, right? And it's not meant to be derogatory about any brand, but it's the temptation, right? Like, we've got to wow you with how smart and wonderful we are as a corporate team. And I know a lot of brands that do it that way for 2 days, and then they have like 3 sessions you can join. And that's backwards. I agree with you 100%. 2.5 hours max. That's that's probably about right for a 2-day.
Yeah, the CEO can do a State of the Union address. You can have the marketing person say, here's what's next. You can have the operations person talk about KPIs, and then you can say, here's what we want you to accomplish in the next 2 days. And here's how we're going to do it. Like literally, you could do every franchise conference. I've done hundreds of them. That formula works better than anything I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. If you want to just create massive momentum in your franchise system, stick to that. And you said something really interesting. They have to justify the royalties. You're in the business of justifying your royalties. And the best way I found to do that, if you're a small franchisor and you're starting out, is you need to be in the lead generation business. You need to be able to say, look, you paid this amount of money to us, and the systems we have generated this amount of lead volume and calls to your business. And that would be worth X amount on the market if you close the normal amount of it. If you can break the metrics down to some kind of regular dashboarding or report or KPI, view on a CRM, franchisees, love that kind of information. If you say, hey, I noticed you got for a window tinting business, you got a job that's $50,000 potential. that came from our corporate site or our GNB listing that we created for you, or the local website that we optimized for you, or you're using our vendor for Facebook conversational marketing, and I noticed you got 50 appointments this month. Like, it's awesome that the stuff we're giving you is really paying off. That like little $800 or $900 royalty payment you got to make is, well, what a good ROI that is. Like, that's the way you have to talk about it, and you have to, because it's human nature. In the absence of information, we make up the worst case scenario. So if you don't tell the story, just like if you don't define your own culture, it defines itself. And if you don't say, hey, here's what we did for you, they come up with some crazy narrative like all entrepreneurs do. It's all about me. I did this all on my own. Like, I'm 100% responsible for my success. Like, that's happens. And you can nip that in the bud by just being transparent, proactive in how you communicate stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I love that because you're right. Anything that's left unsaid can get distorted and twisted, and I've seen that a lot. Some of the best franchise systems that I know, I'll go to a conference and I'll talk to franchisees, and there's always a couple of them that are going to sit in the corner and grumble over drinks and complain about how it's not going well. And then I
Yeah.
look on the corner, like 20 miles away is the number one franchise operator in the country, who's making, easily clearing $500,000 in EBITDA. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you know what? You're in the Houston market, bro. There's no excuse. You should be crushing it right now. So, yeah, I see that a lot,
Right.
and it's often because there hasn't been a proactive approach to communicating the value of the royalty, the value of the franchise, the franchise system's providing.
And it's people talk a lot, but you got to be really careful and recruit the right people. And I think you do have to be careful and recruit people who are fit. You also
Yeah.
have to be proactive about exiting people who aren't a good fit or who get into it. Like, the average tenure of a franchisee in the US is around 5 to 7 years. In service businesses, it's a little lower. It's like 3 to 5 years. People kind of get in and out of service businesses fairly often because they're hard businesses, and it's a lot of hustle, and it's not for everybody, particularly if you're recruiting middle-aged people. Like, they just don't want to work that hard.
Yeah.
Like, 20 people want to kill it. Like, if I'm 55, like, I'm kind of past the part. I already paid my dues. Like, I don't want to get out and start stuff from scratch.
Mhm.
And so I think you have this opportunity to always evaluate your franchisees and have frank conversations about, hey, like, if are you interested in selling? Like, because we probably could find a buyer if you ever want to sell. Let's get your P&L in shape and get it shaped up. And sometimes people will, like, if you have somebody who's underperforming, the process of getting their P&L organized and getting the business some better fundamentals so that it's more sellable and worth more, like, it's either gets them straightened up, or it's easy to find a buyer. It's much easier to sell an existing franchise than recruit a new one today in
Yeah.
today's.
It's interesting. I had a CEO, I think it was a CEO of a franchise brand. I'm now forgetting who told me this, but his words when he was approaching this were, hey, look, I can see that this isn't a great fit, right? I can see that this is frustrating for you. And to be frank, it's frustrating for us a little bit because you're in Denver. That you should be crushing it, but it's hard. This is a hard business model. Would it make sense if we were to help you find a way to sell your business now so you can exit out of it, get your initial return back from the business, and then go to something else that you might be more passionate about? And he said, I've never had anyone mad at me about that conversation.
No, no. The psychology you have to bring to bear is you have to give people choices. Entrepreneurs don't like when they're forced into only one option. So if you say, look, hey, let's just have an honest conversation about, here's what I would like for you to do. Here's what I think might be better.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, option one is to do this. Option two is to sell it. Option three is to find a new buyer. And you just go down the list, reinvest in the business, and which one works better for you, and let them make the choice. And they're all good for you. Like, you
Yeah.
don't like any of them, but if you give somebody a choice, they'll pick one and go for it.
Yeah, I love that. It's so wise. And as it stinks you've got to think about this, but you need to have the plan, right? As a
Yeah.
franchisor, you need to have a plan so that the folks that are the lower denominators, they tend to drag down those around them, right? Instead of coming to these conferences and getting pumped up and sharing best practices, they just want to groan and moan. And so sometimes that can really hurt the culture, and you have to be the steward of the culture. And I think that's when, if you see things like that happening, it's immediately you need to be proactive and say, all right, let's have the conversation and start to offer up those options. I think that's really wise, but
Well,
knowing when to spot it and knowing you have to have that plan in place already, because you will have that happen in your franchise, no matter how great you are at recruiting. It's okay. Guess what? You're
right.
normal. If you're struggling with it today, you're normal. Don't freak out about it. Everyone's got the same problem.
That's right. Yeah, that seems to happen for sure. It's a great conversation. Like I would think somebody could take some of this advice and make some changes in their franchise system for sure.
I think so. And you know what, Thomas, you've been phenomenal. I think you and I could probably go through probably 10 more topics and keep running for another 3 hours. But to keep this digestible, let's wrap up now. A couple of key bullets I want to highlight, and then I'll ask you for some summary thoughts as well.
Sure.
One, I love what you shared about the annual conferences, flipping the script on those, making those almost completely driven by peer-to-peer trainings and collaboration. I love what you shared about generational recruitment. We got to be able to span our recruitment outside of just the people with a bunch of money in the bank that are 38, 40 plus. We got to find out how we can leverage the power of this new entrepreneurial generation that's really suited for coachability, mentorship, and high octane entrepreneur effort. And
Right.
and we also have this last part of our conversation about how do we have a proactive exit strategy for people who are struggling a little bit. I love that. And last thought for me is culture, right? Like you're either building a culture of performance, or you're building a culture of, what was the word you used? Compliance. And
Right.
I think I see a lot of brands that are more compliance cultures. And while compliance is important, if that becomes the focus of your culture, you're not. It's like working for the IRS. No one
Performance
wants that.
always trumps compliance, 100%. The entrepreneur mindset is going to gravitate towards a performance culture, and they're going to be happier. You'll
Mhm.
grow and prosper, and they'll do better sales. So you got to decide what you really want out of the business. Do you want to be right, or do you want to have a business that's successful? Because those two aren't always the same.
That's a great way to think of it. Thomas, share a couple of parting thoughts, if you wouldn't mind, things that you want to make sure people take away from our conversation today.
Yeah, if you're just starting out in franchising, think about culture, think about creating a pioneer group of people that you don't sell franchises to, that you ask permission to be part of a kind of guinea pig group. Like let's break everything. Like start there because you'll and focus on making them happy and profitable. Focus a lot more on marketing. I think the operations and marketing people in any franchise system today are the same. Like marketing people have to be operations people and operations people have to be marketing people. They're not separate disciplines today like they used to be,
Yeah.
because this is all franchising hinges on marketing today. And generally be open to younger buyers. I think you're a fool if you're not. It's easy to recruit, and that they're into taking over the universe, and that can help you grow your business.
Yeah, I love that. Thomas, Scott, what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to connect with you? Should we turn them to
Sure.
LinkedIn? What would you
Yeah,
recommend?
LinkedIn. I'm Thomas Scott with Home Run Franchising. You can go to our website, homerunfranchising.com, or homerunfranchises.com. And for sure, 615-483-4923 is my cell. Happy to chat.
Yeah, you're a good man. Thanks again for joining us on the podcast today, Thomas, and look forward to chatting with you more in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Dave.